Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a temperate, slightly warmer than usual day here in suburban Chicago in late November. The United States is just going into our next big lockdown because so many of my fellow country folk can't seem to take this COVID business seriously. And I am a little bit depressed. But I'm enjoying talking about games with you and going out for a walk to get some much needed exercise. So huzzah! I thought today I would talk about some mistakes. This stems out of an incident yesterday, which will be my starting incident, but connects to a variety of experiences I've had in the last 6 months. Well, not necessarily. Some of these stories are older than that, but I was thinking about one of the things that makes a game good or not, or can make a game good or not, are the individual rules that shape the experience, right? A single rule can change the effect that the game has on what you think is happening or how you think the game is proceeding. It can really influence the outcome of the game, right? Small rules can make a big difference. And one of the things I've noticed is that it's easy to miss small rules, especially in more complicated games, and especially when you play as many different games as I do. And so I was just thinking about rules I'd missed, and I thought it'd be fun to share a few stories about that. Future Brendan here. I recorded this episode in response to the incident with my son regarding the game Ghost Stories, which I'll tell in a moment. But upon returning to my house, I discovered that in fact I'd already recorded an episode about games mistakes called Rules Blunders. It's episode 107 from almost 2 years ago. I'm sure you remember it in detail. As a result, I took out one of the stories I told during this episode because it is in that episode. If you'd like to check that one out, check out the show notes for episode 283, which includes a link to episode 107. Or you could just Google Pick Up and Deliver 107 Rules Blunders, and I'm sure the magic will take you. Thanks for listening. Like I said, the inciting incident came yesterday from my son and I have been making it a habit to play games together each day during his lunch break. We've been choosing games to play and trying out different things. Often we'll play shorter games, but sometimes we'll play longer games. Either way, we end up playing lots of games. It's fun. Yesterday, we broke out one that we hadn't played for over a year, and that was Ghost Stories. Ghost Stories is a perennial favorite for me. I've played it enough times that I've filled up the little record sheet that the game comes with, where you can record how well you do. And I've filled it up with mostly losses. I've had a few wins. But when we were playing yesterday, we looked up a couple things. We noticed we've been doing some things wrong. Two rules in particular we've been playing incorrectly. For those of you who haven't played Ghost Stories before, it is a cooperative tower defense game in which you play a group of 4 Taoist monks protecting a village from evil invading ghosts. The leader of the ghosts is a particularly nasty one called Wu Feng, and it invades the village some point late in the game, at which point if you defeat it, or him, then you win the game. Ghost Stories is designed by Antoine Bauza, a designer whom I enjoy quite a bit. He did Rampage or Terror in Meeple City. He did 7 Wonders. He did Tokaido and many other games. Ghost Stories is a perennial favorite of mine because it's a really interesting, intricate, difficult co-op game. When I'm in the groove, when I've played it once or twice in the last month, and then I play it, I have about even odds winning on the easy mode and maybe 1 in 5 odds winning on the normal mode. It's a pretty hard game, but really fun. So my son and I sat down to play it, and he noticed the iconography on the board that had this circle that I hadn't noticed before. So the setup for Ghost Stories is there's a set of 9 village tiles in the middle of the board, and you can get help from the villagers on your turn. You can either ask for help from a villager or exorcise a ghost. Those are your two. There I'm saying exorcise, get rid of, not exercise as in, lead on a workout. When you get help from a villager, their tile does a particular thing. And one of the tiles that is there, I had always interpreted as take a token. that you can go to that tile and pick a token that you want. It made sense to me because there's another tile where you can roll the dice and get 2 tokens, but you don't get to pick which ones you get. So if you really needed a particular one, you might go to that other one and not get what you want. But I didn't know what the extra dot on the graphic design meant, or the extra space. So I looked up in the book and I discovered that we had been playing that tile incorrectly the entire time I've been playing Ghost Stories, almost 5 years. Because when I originally got it, it does say take a token, but then there's this other circle. And what you're supposed to do is take a token from the supply and put it on this other circle. And now every ghost of that color, that ghost strength is reduced by 1. Holy cow! This is a huge benefit. Instead of just getting 1 token that you can use to fight 1 ghost, you're getting a permanent 1 token discount for all ghosts. Huge. In other words, I've been making this game incredibly much harder on ourselves than we needed to. So having read that, my son and I decided maybe we should read through the rules for the other 8 tiles to make sure we're doing them all correctly. So 7 of the other 8 tiles we were doing correctly. However, there was another one we were doing wrong. There's one tile we call ringing the bell, because the picture shows a person with a bell. It has some sort of narrative fluff about praying. And the idea is that some of the ghosts in the game move forward. They have a little figure and they move forward, and if you let them move forward twice without taking care of them, then they haunt a tile. And in this game, if you ever have 3 of your 9 tiles haunted, you lose instantly. But the ring a bell tile allows you to move ghosts back. However, the way the tile is written, it shows 3 ghosts next to each other being moved back. And what it means is, when you ring the bell, you can pick one of the player boards, one of the 4 player boards, and move the ghosts on that player board back, meaning a quarter of the board can have the ghosts backed up. It buys you 1 turn. Well, for the entire 5 years we've had this, I thought that you got to move all of the ghosts on the whole board back. In other words, I was making this tile much stronger than it is, rather than much weaker than it is. So in that regard, I was making the game easier than it should have been. Now honestly, I think the ease versus difficulty of playing the game in that mode versus the ease and difficulty of playing the game without that token bonus, I think in the wash, I made it harder rather than easier. But still, we found 2 places where we were playing incorrectly. It's a bummer to discover that you've been playing a game wrong this whole time, and I'm looking forward to trying the game out, having this new tool of this reduced value, or of this token available to us. That's Ghost Stories from Antoine Bauza and Repost Productions. Having had that experience, it got me thinking about other places where a rules misinterpretation has an effect in my gameplay. So I want to talk about 4 more experiences like that. One is in the dice for wingspan. This is probably the most commonly discussed or misconstrued rule in the popular card drafting bird game, Wingspan, is that when the dice run out, you can refresh them, or anytime you're supposed to take dice, if you only have 1 choice of die face, you get to refresh them. The way we had played it was, when you went to take dice, if they had run out, you could refresh them. I don't know if you heard the difference in those 2 rules, but the big difference is, if there are 4 dice of the 5 out of the bird feeder, and I want to take a thing, I can either take that one that's left, or I can refresh. But if I take that one that's left, all the dice immediately get re-rolled. That's important because there are scavenger powers that depend on dice being not in the bird feeder. So we had, in our first few plays, played that if you took that 5th die, and then weren't taking any more, then there were 5 dice out of the bird feeder, meaning your scavenging power got much easier to achieve, rather than impossible because you put all 5 back in and there's 0 dice out of the bird feeder. That was a minor glitch in our play, and I don't think it wrecked anything too strongly, but it certainly did give me an early affection for those scavenging birds that probably is overpowered. My affection for those birds is stronger than it should be. But Wingspan has a bunch of those kinds of rules where people in particular, the dice thing is one where people have a lot of trouble making it work in their head. I feel like there's one other one as well. Oh, paying for things with eggs. The egg price at the top of the column, sometimes people will interpret that to mean that you have to pay an egg regardless of which action row you're taking. I think that one's solved much faster because the rulebook's pretty clear about that. But so those are some wingspan related problems people have, including us. Man, to understand suddenly that I'd been playing a rule wrong the whole time would be really frustrating. I got to experience that frustration firsthand in my wife and I's most recent play of Obsession. And I talked about Obsession a little bit on the Shooting from the Hip episode a couple last week. On our second play, my wife and I discovered that we'd been playing a rule wrong the whole time. So when you're playing a two-player game, the instructions and have you put out a certain number of valets, a certain number of footmen, and a certain number of ladies' maids in the employment area. You also add one under butler. Now, if you look at the rules, when you go to hire staff, it says you can hire up to 2 footmen, valets, and ladies' maids. We didn't make the connection that you could not hire that under butler. We thought the first person to take the hiring action got to take the under butler, which is what I did in the first game, and then actually in the second game as well. I tried to hold off hiring. I actually waited an extra round to hire so my wife would have the chance to grab the under butler. But then she didn't, and eventually I'm like, I need to hire some staff. And you did not take the under butler, so I'm going to. So we got almost to the end of the second game, in which I did quite well, but we've now put an asterisk on it, and I did not box top it, because it turns out, I couldn't hire the under butler. To hire the under butler, you need to get the butler's pantry, which is it's a tile that you have to recruit, and then you have to use it, and then you get to hire the under butler. And the under butler is a powerful character because it can act like a butler, or it can act like a valet, or it can act like a footman. So it's got flexibility, which most of the meeples do not. And so the long and short of it was that I had a little bit of an advantage that I shouldn't have had. I mean, if I'd hired a footman or hired a valet, it would have given me a little less flexibility there than I had with the under butler, which I shouldn't have been able to buy. Now, this one was less consequential as a rules mistake because it happened early in the game. It's only our second play, and having discovered it so dramatically, I won't forget it again. That'll be a rule I'll remember pretty easily. The last one actually got me a little salty. It took me a round or two to kind of shake it off, just because I had found a really good plan. So I've talked about the idea that one of my favorite things to do in games is play these games that have enough moving pieces and enough complicated things that trying to find a plan to get everything done with the limited resources you have is my favorite feeling in a game. I call it the feeling of just not quite enough. Trying to navigate that and land in the right spot. It's my favorite. So in that context, looking for the place in the game where the feeling of just right, not right enough comes through, that is really fun in a game. Over the weekend, my wife, my daughter, and I played Everdell with the Pearlbrook expansion, which was delightful. And I had found a combination of cards and actions that was, over the course of like 4 or 5 turns, going to yield me some pretty great stuff. And I sort of planned it all out, and I was doing my best to keep this complicated set of choices in my head, because I had to remember to do them in order. If I did them in the wrong order, I wasn't going to have enough to do what I needed to do. And a little bit depended on them not taking the thing I needed. And so it was a nice mix of a variety of ideas. So just before I was going to start my action, my wife played a card, which had it said something like, reveal 2 cards, choose and build one for free, discard the other. Or choose and one, build one of value up to 3 for free, and discard the other. And she played that, and I didn't really think much of it. And then like 2 turns later, it was my turn, and I went to play a card, and and when she did it, she drew 2 cards off the deck, showed them, picked one, played it. So then when my turn came a couple turns later, I played this card, and then I revealed 2 cards out of my hand, and started to play one and discard the other. And then I stopped myself and I was like, wait a second. And I noticed that the card I was playing was the same card my wife had played. And the one my wife had played, she drew 2 cards off the deck. But I was planning, my whole system depended on me playing the card out of my hand instead of some random card off the deck. So I was like, oh wait, you did cards off the deck. She's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I was like, oh no. I was thinking I revealed 2 cards out of my hand. But yeah, it doesn't say reveal 2 cards out of your hand. Normally reveal does mean take off. Like, as I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, it would mean take it out of the deck. So then I looked it up, and sure enough, yes, in the explanation of the card in the rule book, it does say you take those cards off the deck. So I was like, no, because my whole plan had depended on getting this other card into play, and I couldn't because I didn't have the resources for it. I didn't have enough workers to do it, and I couldn't do that because, so like my whole plan of being able to do something with not quite enough was built on the idea of playing this one card, and my interpretation of how that card worked was wrong. Now, I know this has happened to other people in games I've played, it's happened to me in games I've played, but this one was it particularly stuck in my craw just because it was such a nice mix of things that was going to work just perfectly, and then it didn't work, of course, and sadness ensued. Now, it wasn't real sadness, but it took me a couple turns to shake it off because I had such an elaborate plan. I had basically planned out 4 or 5 turns, and now that whole plan was in shambles, and I had to rethink the architecture and rethink which pieces of it could I recover, and how could I, redo the plan. And then I felt also the pressure of, it's my turn now, so I'm holding everyone up by trying to think this through, but it's the key moment in the game. So it was a really, in retrospect, a really delightful gaming moment. At the time, it was a bummer to realize I was reading the card wrong, because it really was a misinterpretation in the card. It pretty clearly meant from the deck. I just really wanted it to mean from my hand, so I think I read it from my hand. That's one more place where the rules got the better of me. I was thinking about to myself, what kind of design lessons can I learn from this? Of course, having rules that tie very closely to theme, especially sort of edgy rules at the edge of things, or inconsequential rules, they help. Having them tie to theme helps a lot. If the player knows why a thing works the way it does, it's easier to remember that it works that way. A lot of the rules I'm talking about here don't have a particularly clear thematic reasoning for why they work the way they do. Having heard these stories, I'm curious what rules mistakes pop into your mind. When have you aimed for a certain thing and found that you were heading the wrong way? When have you had to regretfully tell someone else, oh, I'm sorry, that card does not work the way that you think it does, and watched as their plans crumble? Do you take joy in that? I hope not. That's not a fun feeling, but necessary sometimes and important. You can let us know those things over in the Board Game Geek Guild 3269, or you can let me know individually, Brendan at Rattlebox Games, or you can tweet at us, Rattlebox Games on Twitter. Where else could you get a hold of us? We have a Facebook page that we don't check much, but I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts about these situations. Well, that's about it for today. Thank you for joining me. I really enjoy chatting with you about my gameplays and my experiences, and I hope that you enjoy it as well, which I assume you do or you wouldn't listen. Have a great weekend, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.